Is this the summer for the Sacramento Kings to finally go all in, take their draft picks and assets, and make a big move to truly compete in a very stacked Western Conference? And is Brandon Ingram that big move? Kyle Madson from ESPN 1320's The Insiders joins me right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And I've had the privilege of knowing Kyle Madson and working with Kyle Madson for a very long time. If you are not familiar with his show, The Insiders with James Ham, who's been a long-time Sacramento Kings insider, you should be familiar with that show. You should be listening to it all year long. It's on from 10 to noon on ESPN 1320, Monday through Friday. They have fantastic conversations, not just about the Sacramento Kings, but about all of local sports, professional sports, international sports. They're unbelievable, those two, and two very, very good friends. So to have Kyle here on the Locked On Kings podcast is always a treat, and I had to have him on because I'm quite frankly stealing a lot of this conversation from their show. I was listening to it. They were talking about this summer being the summer to really make that move and why they're not really, or Kyle in particular is not really accepting the patience excuses anymore. Like, this is the time to go. This is the summer to make that move. So I thought, let's have Kyle on and let's hash this that conversation out a little bit more, and also tie in Brandon Ingram, who of course is a name that is available. The New Orleans Pelicans are reportedly putting him on the trade block this summer, and in many ways, Ingram is the type of player that the Sacramento Kings need, but Ingram also comes with some concerns. And how much are you willing to give up in order to bring Ingram here? Kyle and I discuss all of that on today's episode, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hey kids, here's a tip. Plagiarism isn't good, but sometimes it might feel necessary. It's not good, it's not ethical, it's not the right thing to do, but then you'll hear a certain show, maybe a show called The Insiders on ESPN 1320, bring up a topic that would be a really good podcast episode. So you start planning out, how do I do this episode and take basically everything that they talked about, but make it my own? Screw it. I'll just have one of them on to talk about it with me, so at least it looks like I'm sharing credit and not being an absolute scumbag and skimming off of their work. Kyle Madson from ESPN 1320's The Insiders joins me. We're going to talk a lot about this summer being the summer to go all in, especially with draft assets for the Kings. We'll also talk about Brandon Ingram. Kyle, thank you for coming up with content so that I could steal it.
Bro, if you're not jacking content from other people, you're not doing this right.
That's a good point.
Like, dude, I blog and podcast about the 49ers. I see people tweet something, I'm like, I'm making a post about that. And obviously, you include the tweet and you give the credit, but nah, man, we're all swimming in the same pool. There's no plagiarism here.
I was operating for months with the belief that I'm not going to have to care about the draft one bit because the Kings aren't going to have a draft pick because they're going to be a playoff team and we're not going to have to worry about the draft and blah, 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 blah. Now it's May 15th. I'm barely into the offseason and I'm scraping at the draft for any kind of content that I could possibly get. So shout out the draft for giving us something. But hey, let's talk about beyond the draft, because I have a general feeling at this point in time, Kyle, and I don't know if you have the same feeling or not. I'm not saying that it's guaranteed that the Kings will move 13, but I think it just makes sense, or it's in the best interest of the Sacramento Kings to move the 13th pick on draft night. I don't think adding a rookie to this roster is really what Monty McNair and the Kings front office is and should be looking for as their first option to improve this team in a very competitive Western Conference. But it's kind of a small part of an overall bigger conversation that you and James brought up of, if you have all these draft assets, because I know it's muddied with their trade with the Atlanta Hawks and the Kevin Huerter trade, but other than that, the Kings own all their picks. So if you have all these assets, and you, being Monty McNair, said yourself, your own words in your end of season press conference, we are a team to win, we're built to win right now. What are you doing holding on to those assets at this point in time when there are not only teams that are clearly ahead of you in the West, there are teams below you or around you that are more than ready to leapfrog you? Yeah. It's just a crazy spot for Sacramento to be in.
Yeah, man. I've seen that some, and there are plenty of people who are all about trading the picks, but I've seen some people talking about like, well, you can't trade for that guy. You can't trade those picks for that. Like, if you're projecting out that this is going to be a good team, why do you care about the picks? They're not going to matter. They just don't. These aren't NFL draft picks where you need first round picks to start kind of replenishing your roster, because every 4 years, you know, that you're going to start losing guys. And we talk about that with the 49ers all the time. But in the NBA, like, the NBA doesn't work like that. The 27th pick in the NBA is like a 5th round pick in the NFL draft. That might be maybe like a 3rd or 4th round pick in the NFL draft. So I think, like you said, Monty McNair said it. This is a team that's built to win now. De'Aaron Fox is not 22 years old. Domantas Sabonis is not 22 years old. This isn't the Thunder where there's this wide window and it's like, okay, this is the start of the ramp up. Like, the ramp up happened. And regardless of where you think they are on that scale, their window to make that leap to get into a conversation with the Nuggets and possibly the Timberwolves, and certainly with Oklahoma City. And you mentioned some of the other teams behind them. You know, Houston's going to be right there, I think. I don't think Dallas is necessarily going anywhere. This is a New Orleans, depending on how their offseason goes, could be pretty daunting for the next several years. They have to make a significant move to me now. Waiting another year until De'Aaron is 28 or 29 and Domas is 29, like, that's just not, I don't think that's necessarily in the cards. And I think worrying about your first round picks is the wrong thought process to have.
The good news is the Kings aren't in a position like the Phoenix Suns are, where they have all this superstar win now talent and they've got no draft capital whatsoever. And it's clear they are in complete, like, win a title or flame the heck out territory. Sacramento's not in that spot, right?
Yeah.
But the Kings are also in a spot where time is no longer on their side, because younger teams that were not as far along as you were last season have now not just surpassed you, they've kind of blown you out of the water. And we're talking about OKC and Minnesota. Now, can both those franchises do it for multiple seasons? That's to be determined. But they were really, 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 really good this year, when coming into the season, the Kings were expected to be on the same level or better than them, at least for a lot of us here in Sacramento on that side of things. But Kyle, I'm curious where you're at with Monty McNair, because Monty's gone through last offseason where he decided to run everything back. Hindsight's 2020. At the time, it seemed like the right move. Ultimately, did not work out. And he went through 2 straight trade deadlines where essentially he did nothing. Like, Kessler Edwards was his addition 2 years ago. This trade deadline didn't do anything. And the context of that is, well, you tried for Pascal Siakam, but it didn't make sense because he didn't want to re-sign. You tried for this guy. You have to have 2 to tango, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm willing to give a GM the benefit of the doubt at that time. But Monty can't go into next season, in my mind, without making upgrades to this roster and the conversation be, well, we tried, but it just didn't make sense. Like, you got to make it make sense at this point, right?
Bro, yes. And that's where it's tough. Like, this is the conversation with the San Francisco Giants every offseason since Farhan Zaidi's been there. I think he's their president of baseball operations or whatever his title is, since he's been running the show. It's like every offseason, it's like, okay, this is the year, going to get a big name. And then they don't, and they're just like, well, we tried. And that just doesn't cut it, man. And I get that look, here's where I'm at with Monty McNair, just to answer your question. Obviously did a great job to get the team to where it was in the 22-23 season. 48 wins. That's a great step for a team that was in the pits, the abyss of NBA mediocrity for so long, that getting to 48 wins, and it was a down year for the West, so they're the 3 seed, like, how exciting. And the reality is that 48 wins would have given them the 8th seed this year. Is where 48 wins would have landed you in this season. But still, nevertheless, 48 wins, playoff team, awesome. Great little benchmark to hit. They had to, I thought, run it back. That was the phrase of the offseason, right? You had to do that. You saw proof positive that this group of players works. So you re-sign Harrison Barnes, and you add a player like Chris Duarte, who I loved that ad. I thought that the impact Keon Ellis had at the end of the year, I thought Chris Duarte would have from the jump. It obviously didn't work out like that, but I loved the little tweaks they made to the roster. And it's like, okay, you see the vision. And then it didn't work. So now you know what your core of players is going to be. It's Domas, it's De'Aaron Fox, and it's Keegan Murray, and ideally Malik Monk, but that's a little bit out of Sacramento's hands to an extent. This is the year now. This is the time where, okay, you've gotten 2 years to have this, pretty good little team, but now you got to make this jump. And I'm with you, man. Our hands were tied. There just wasn't a deal out there for us. Maybe Paul George re-signs with the Clippers and Jimmy Butler goes back to the Heat and Brandon Ingram gets traded for Donovan Mitchell and Trae Young gets sent to, or DeJounte Murray gets sent to San Antonio. It's just kind of like, man, tough. But like, dog, that's your job. Mm-hmm. That's you're there to figure that out. And if you have not, and this is not to say you're making every move for 5 years down the road, but if you have not accumulated the assets in, what has it been, 4 years now?
Yeah.
In 4 years that you can't be competitive in the trade market, that's a major issue to me. So it would be extremely disappointing as I ramble. Let me try and whittle this down. It'd be really disappointing if they go into this year with like minor tweaks to the roster.
Yeah.
Where it's, their seventh guy and eighth guy are a little bit better. The bench depth is a little better. Like, cool, you're about where you were the last 2 seasons. And that's not to say that I'd be in like a fire Monty McNair camp, but it would be the first time where I personally don't see the vision of what this team is supposed to be going forward. I still see it right now. But if we go into the 24-25 season and it's just largely this same group where you're going, all right, even if they make the playoffs, how deep are they going? That to me is a wasted year.
Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. It is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL right now, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own without having to risk much at all. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 that you can bet on spreads, money lines, player props, or more, and you can win that by only putting $5 of your own money on the line. Take the biggest, best, most biggest favorite you could possibly find, whether it's a game, a season award, whatever it may be, even if it pays out pennies to your $5 bet. Take it, because the $150 in bonus bets that you'll get when you win is what's more important. Then you can use that $150 to really start to make some real money and have a lot of fun on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. So what you just said, I think the majority of Sacramento Kings fans, at least the vocal majority, they echo, which is you don't just want to go into this next season making minor tweaks in addition to your 7th man or your 8th man and adding those rotational pieces. Hear that completely. I am, and I think I've spooked some people by saying this, because I think in the end of season press conference, I think Monty McNair and to a certain level Mike Brown already is kind of setting the table for that. And their comments, Mike's in particular, were, hey, we should have won 50 plus games. We should have been a 51-52 win team. He talked about the injuries. He talked about some of the blown leads that the Kings had, like for example the Phoenix game or the Milwaukee game. Of course, the loss to Detroit or Washington, or all, like literally the bottom 4 teams in the league lost to all 4 of them, right?
Yeah.
So, and I get what he's saying, but I felt like, and I don't know if I'm reading too far into this, and this is ultimately just GM and coach optimistic jargon at the end of the season. I just feel like there's still a belief in this front office that bring Malik Monk back is priority number 1. But if they do that, that's the equivalent of landing their big name free agent. and then bolstering their rotation with versatile, athletic, longer wings, and that team is ready to go. And I don't know if that should scare people or not.
I think it's like, are they good players, these long athletic wings?
Yeah.
Because, like, if that means 30 minutes a night of Kessler Edwards, I'm a little less optimistic. No disrespect to Kessler Edwards, he's just not there yet.
Sure.
And maybe there's a bigger role for him on the team this year. You know, he's got a whole offseason to work, and maybe he factors in. I'm actually a big fan of Kessler Edwards. I didn't mean to take a shot. But if that's their plan, then and maybe it works out. But going into the year, if it's a bunch of unproven guys and they're like, yeah, but look at how tall they are and look at how high they jump. Okay. I like the idea, but can they hoop? Can they play basketball? Can they knock down a corner three? Can they play defense without falling asleep on a back cut? Can they play on the ball? Are they switchable? Like, there's so many. Are they going to hustle? Are they going to rebound? Are they going to get? There's all these different factors that'll go into it. So, I'm not anti that plan, actually, where, you know, they bring back Malik Monk and then supplement their roster. I think one of the things, like, Harrison Barnes and Kevin Huerter always come up, right?
Yep.
And I think you need to upgrade over Harrison in the starting lineup. But that starts to get into the realm of, I don't think that player's just going to, like, be there. I don't think it's super as much as I've, as critical as I've been of Harrison Barnes, he doesn't stink. He's not, like, bad at basketball. Finding an upgrade over Harrison Barnes, I think, is necessary to get this team to the next level. But at the same time, like, Harrison Barnes is in a tier of player that it's not just easy to go find a better version of that. I think they need to, but it's like, that's why the jump from good to title contender is so hard. So that's kind of where I land with that. I'm all in on the idea of bringing in length and athleticism, but they also have to A, fit the system, and B, be able to, like, play.
When you're talking about a Harrison Barnes upgrade, are you operating under the belief that Kevin Huerter is remaining the starting shooting guard on this team? If Kevin Huerter is back with the Kings and he remains the Sacramento Kings at the start of training camp next year and is hopefully fully healthy and his shoulder is back to normal, is your expectation that is his starting two guard spot to lose, or do you think Keon has that on lock, assuming the roster doesn't add maybe even Malik Monk? If Malik Monk comes back, I would almost guarantee he's a starting shooting guard, or that's part of his negotiation. But I have no idea. But do you think Kevin Huerter is still in that starting shooting guard spot? Because that's part of why I feel like the Kings will not move from Harrison Barnes, but I'll get to that in a second.
Okay. For me, Keon Ellis is your starting two guard. At least going into camp. To me, that has to be the case. The impact he had defensively, he showed enough offensively to make you think that teams will have to at least guard him. I don't know if you want him creating a ton. He flashed out a little bit, but I think if he can credibly just hit threes where he can be on the court defensively, and teams actually have to pay attention to guard him, I think he's your starting two guard. That's not to say that Kevin Huerter can't have a role. But I think just saying, yeah, hey, Kevin, you're the starting two guard, and Keon, you're the seventh guy again. That's hustling backwards to me. I think so much of what they accomplished defensively and so many of the breakthroughs Mike Brown made defensively, particularly after the All-Star break, had a lot to do. I don't think it's a coincidence that Keon Ellis started playing more and they got better at defense. I don't think it was a light bulb came on at about the same time that Keon started really breaking through. I think he started breaking through and then the light bulb came on. So to me, I think you're going backwards if you start Kevin Huerter. And maybe Kevin Huerter improves defensively a lot over the offseason and Keon Ellis can't find his shot in training camp. And all of a sudden it's just like, all right, well, Kevin Huerter's clearly the better player. Then fine. But I think today you have to start Keon at the two. And as far as the Malik Monk aspect of this goes, I think he's perfect in the 6-man role. And I think if he's starting, I think you're looking at like, hey, okay, here's a cursory, like, great, you started, quote unquote. You'll play 3 minutes and then we're going to get you to the bench and we're going to get back into a rotation you would have been in as a 6-man anyway.
Right. But if Malik's one of Malik's caveats to I'll resign in Sacramento, but I want the starting shooting guard spot. I mean, you're of the same belief as I am. Yeah, of course you have to do it. So
I'm one of the Malik is their most important player, guys.
Yeah.
More so than De'Aaron, more so than Domantas Sabonis, and that's not shaded either of those guys. They're better players, but I think Malik's importance is just unmatched.
Well, going back to Kevin Huerter, a lot of what you said about reasons why Keon should be looked at as the starter over Kevin, at least going into training camp, is amongst the reasons why I feel like the Kings are going to confidently try and include him in any trade package they do this offseason. I have questions about how good of a role Kevin Huerter could play coming off the bench, not because I don't believe he can't hit threes off the bench, but because I see him coming in and playing more of a 3 role because of the 3-guard lineups that Mike already likes to implement and the defense and versatility of that. And Kevin does not fit that bill. So I don't know what Kevin looks like coming off the bench. So I think he's on the move. And I would put more money on Kevin being moved over Harrison Barnes.
Me too.
And I'm not saying this is the right way to look at it, but simply because of Harrison's intangibles. The fact that Harrison is 6'8", 6'9", with a wingspan, like that is what the Kings need in abundance. And going back to what you said about upgrading Harrison, it's hard to find a scenario where you're trading Harrison Barnes for a better version of Harrison Barnes. Like it doesn't really exist unless you're throwing a lot of draft capital on top of that, which is why the draft picks come into play. But even so, players at the size and the role that in theory you want Harrison Barnes to play are coveted around the league. Correct. Like that's arguably the most important player archetype in the modern NBA today is that kind of archetype, and every team wants that in abundance. So I think Sacramento will almost be afraid to trade Harrison away because Harrison is one of the few people on this roster not named Keegan Murray that has those same measurements. It's that simple to me.
Yeah, man, and let me be clear with this. The only way I'm moving Harrison Barnes is if it's in a larger deal for a better player. Like a significant upgrade. He's too valuable, I think, in the locker room. He still provides value on the court, even though I have my quibbles with his cardio nights. But I'm only attaching him to match salary with a larger salaried player to get that particular player to Sacramento. I'm not just shipping him out because I just think he doesn't fit or whatever.
Is Brandon Ingram that kind of player?
Probably.
Yeah.
Like I have a hard time with Brandon Ingram, man. I don't.
with you.
He's good. He's very obviously good at basketball. Like that's not in question. But when you talk about his fit with the Kings and does he get Sacramento to like contender level? Maybe. But again, the problem is, and James and I talked about this the other day on the Insiders, Monday through Friday, 10 to noon on ESPN 1320. We talked about this the other day. It's not like there's 10 of these players available and the Kings have to pick one to go after. This might just be the move. And I would rather I have my quibbles with Brandon Ingram as a player, and the Pelicans, frankly, do too, and that's why they're not going to extend him. Because they're looking for a superstar to pair with Zion, and they think that BI is not it. Maybe he'd be better in a role like he would be in Sacramento, where he's like a secondary and sometimes tertiary ball handler if he's on the court with Monk and Fox. Maybe that would be a better role for him. But at the same time, there's all these warts and there's all these things that I think he can or can't do, or I don't trust him to show up on a night-in, night-out basis. I don't trust him to be on the court for 75-plus games and then potentially 20-plus playoff games. Like that's all. Those are all questions I have. But at the same time, I'd rather they take a swing than go into next year with, all right, here's the roster again. It's just the same guys. We're going to just try and do the same thing but get a little better. I would way rather they bring in Brandon Ingram and move some assets and take that swing and roll the dice on that than roll the dice on a roster that we already know what it's going to be. They're going to win 48-ish games, and they're going to be a fringe playoff team that may or may not win around.
So on paper, Brandon Ingram is exactly the player or the type of player that the Sacramento Kings are looking for and need. So him becoming available makes it a must. That, like, I think when I read the report that the Pelicans are heavily going to be shopping him this offseason, I think my immediate reaction was Monty shouldn't be willing to like mortgage the complete future of the organization in order to get Ingram, but he should absolutely be working the phones and be one of the first guys making a call. That being said, to revisit an earlier part of our conversation, right? Brandon's going into the last year of his deal. The Kings didn't make a move for Pascal Siakam. It got really far. It was very, very close while both the Kings and the Kings and Raptors were here in Sacramento. The deal almost got done. The hang-up was because of Pascal Siakam's unwillingness to re-sign and stay with the Sacramento Kings, and the Kings didn't feel that a 1 year or rest of the season rental was worth the price, whatever it would be, to get him. We just talked about the circumstances of, but like we gave him a pass for that because it made sense. Like, you don't want the rental of Siakam. If Ingram is the guy and the Kings ultimately decide not to go for him because they don't feel that he will remain in Sacramento, does he still get that same pass an offseason later? Or is it like, dude, you got to do something. That was the move, and then hope it works out.
Yeah, man, because at some point you can't, your fan base isn't, and I love Kings fans, and they're one of the most loyal fan bases in the NBA. Like, anybody listening to this podcast knows this. I'm preaching to the choir here. But at some point, the excuse of, well, nobody wants to play here. Nobody wants to sign here. So, like, well, all right, then what are we all doing? Then what's the point? You're just going to swing in the draft and hope that you draft the 2015 Warriors? Like, that doesn't freaking go, man. Like, right. Victor Wembanyama isn't there every year. Right. I just don't buy that, man. If you trade for a player and he plays here for a year and you can provide a coaching staff and a roster that allows that player to feel A, maximized, and B, like they have a chance to win a lot of basketball games and to win a ring or multiple, then they're going to play here.
Yeah.
Then they'll be here. But if you're not even going to try because you're waiting for somebody who's under longer team control, then go get Zach LaVine. Yeah. Then go do that. And I would hate that. I think that would be a disaster. But that's kind of what you're looking at then. Okay, great. Trade for Brad Beal then. He's going to be under contract. You've got him. Now what?
Yikes.
Yeah. So right. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just saying if the argument from the front office is, well, Ingram wasn't going to resign here anyways, then all right. Unless he's like, you know what? 0% chance we could win a title. We could go 98-0 and win a title, and I'm not coming back. All right. Well, then fine. Right. But if he's like, I don't know, then yeah, dude, then make your move and make your pitch.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats, and you watch the winnings roll in. There's so many fun and creative ways to play. Of course, PrizePicks is going crazy right now with the NBA playoffs. I played PrizePicks all season long with the Sacramento Kings, had a very, very successful season on PrizePicks with the Kings, and I'm not alone. So many Kings fans, Kings media members, my friends, my family members, all playing PrizePicks, and you could pair it from, let's say, playoff basketball action, right, with the NBA, with an MLB game, right? There's so many creative and fun ways for you to build these PrizePick entries. You can also play their demons or goblins. Goblins are basically easier or more likely payout. So, for example, like a demon or goblin would be, let's say Luka Doncic's normal is more or less than 28.5 points. The goblin is 26.5 points. The demon is 32.5 points. Well, if you hit the demon, obviously that is a bigger payout. If you hit the Goblin, it's a bit smaller payout, but it's a safe one that helps you ultimately get that big payout you're looking for with 3, 4, 5, or even 6 picks. You can win up to 100 times your entry if you do 6 demons, and I've seen it happen before. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Final thing for you, Kyle. Monty has already shown a willingness to make the big move at the expense of the young asset on his roster. Of course, we're talking about Tyrese Halliburton and Domantas Sabonis in that trade a handful of seasons ago. I am the wrong person to have this conversation or have the question asked because the bias is through the absolute roof. I am, if there is an untouchable list, Keegan Murray is as close to being on that list, if not on it, in permanent ink for me, just because of the belief I have in him, plus how much I love him as a player, plus how much he as a player is exactly what the Kings need more of. But I digress. How, from your perspective, how under wraps should the Sacramento Kings be keeping Keegan Murray, and how unwilling or willing should they be to include him in these conversations? Because I guarantee you, every significant trade conversation the Kings will have this summer will begin with, sure, let's talk Murray.
Yeah. I think to me, he's not on an untouchable list. On the other hand, I'm not including him in a Brandon Ingram trade.
Agreed.
For example. Now, if they call the Cavs and say Donovan Mitchell wants out, and the Cavs say, well, let's talk Keegan Murray. Okay, let's talk Keegan Murray at that point. Or pick another. I don't know. I don't care.
Miami,
but if
did you do it with Butler?
No.
Yeah. Okay. No. We're on the same page.
I love Jimmy Butler. I just don't think if he was 31, sure, but I'm out on that.
Yep.
No, not untouchable, but I think you have to get an all-star back. Like a Sabonis level player, where when they traded for Sabonis, it's like, oh, this guy is a. It's funny to think about now. Like, this guy's a threat to get you a triple double, and this guy was an all-star. Like that. That's the kind of like player you would need to be getting. Where it's like, oh, this fit. The fit with Domas and Fox was like, okay, there was a vision there. And like you said, Keegan is just too much the type of player they need to move him for a player that I back up 3, 2, and 1. There's not going to be a realistic trade available that I would include Keegan in, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, sure. If the Celtics are like, hey, we're just kind of sick of Jason Tatum, then great. Yeah. Put Keegan on the table, but that's obviously not going to happen. So that's kind of
Jaylen Brown. That was my name. Like if they call for Jaylen Brown, I'm like, okay, I'll do it.
Sure. Yeah. Let's party. But, no, I just don't think like Brandon Ingram, Jimmy Butler, Paul George. Like I will say this about Keegan. And then I have a question for you, but I will say this about Keegan. I was all in on him at 4 in that draft. Like, go check the tweets. I was about it. I thought he was the perfect player for them. I got a little concerned about his defense in year 1. I thought he'd be a little better defender, but he proved to be that in year 2.
Sure.
I have a reservation with him and his mindset, and the fact that there are too many nights where he starts 6 of 8 and then finishes the game with 11 shots or 12 shots. And that's something where if he's going to become the player that they need, because look, he made some really nice strides this year, but I need a leap. I need he is night in and night out, 17, 18, 19 shots. He's creating his own shot. He's getting to the free throw line. He's continuing to be an elite defender. This whole hey, he's an elite defender now, so obviously he's not going to shoot it as well. Like, well, tough. Like, you got to figure that out.
Yeah.
If this is, I'm definitely giving him another year. Like I said, he's not untouchable, but he's very close. If by this year there's still like, oh yeah, he has it. Play-in tournament was a perfect example. Golden State, he lights it up, and it was like, holy shoot, yes, Keegan, oh my God, this is great. And then he goes away in New Orleans. It's like, bro, they need you, dog. If they want to take that leap, if they want to be with Denver and Minnesota and Oklahoma City, or at least theoretically Oklahoma City, just projecting them out, they need Keegan Murray to be like a 20 points a night type of guy, like a secondary shot creator type of guy. And he just hasn't been that consistently enough. So he's the player this year. Monty's got to go make his moves, and the Kings have to, fix the roster for sure. But I need Keegan to be a lot better more consistently.
I think this is a full podcast episodes that we can do and should do before training camp begins, because I'm on the exact same page with you. Because I think you and I both were screaming on social media and in real life on those games where Keegan would start red hot and then just completely disappear and question, is it a Keegan issue? Is it a team issue? And I think it's a little bit of both. But then we'd ask Mike about it post game, and Mike would say, like, Keegan's trying to figure out his way on a roster full of guys where Fox needs his shots and Sabonis needs his shots. I'm also thinking, Keegan also needs to turn to Fox and turn to Sabonis sometimes and go, y'all are taking 25. Well, in Fox's case, you're taking 25. You don't got to do that. Give me the freaking ball. Yeah. So, and hopefully that comes in year 3. Hopefully that comes in year 4. This team is loaded with personalities of guys that let their games do the talking. And I appreciate that. But at some point, someone needs to open their freaking mouth, whether it's inside the locker room or at an opposing team or opposing player. Fox does it sometimes. Maybe they need more. I think it goes into a broader conversation and a broader issue. There's so many aspects with this team that they have to address this summer. That's what makes this summer and offseason so exciting and terrifying. Of course, on the Insiders, you and James will have these conversations all summer long, all of off-season long, around the draft, free agency, summer league, and all of that. So check that out. Also, if you're a San Francisco 49ers fan, Kyle Madson does the amazing job with Niners Wire. And the Niners schedule just dropped today. Check out the Candlestick Chronicles podcast. They'll be talking and breaking that down well. So, Kyle, I appreciate you making some time on this busy schedule release day, my friend. I look forward to the Kings schedule release coming up in a couple of months.
It's going to be great. Schedule releases are my favorite thing. No. Hey, can I ask you a question just real quick? Are you concerned at all that Mike Brown has not gotten an extension yet?
No, I'm not.
Do you have a date where you will be concerned?
Man.
Here's what I fear. I
don't want to think about.
I think they're going to extend him. I think it's going to happen. Because remember, there was a question with Monty, too. It's like, what are they waiting for? And then they did it.
Yeah.
My concern is that Vivek is sitting there going like, hey, went backwards last year. Show that you can go forwards, and then we'll extend you. Because if you don't go forwards, then we're going to move on, and I don't want to pay $10 million a year. That would be my greatest concern. I'm so like, not 100% worried, but like 13% worried about that.
I hear that completely. I am not taking I would not, and he would never say that publicly, of course. I would not accept an ounce of that until the man proves that he's willing to go into the luxury tax to actually compete in the Western Conference, which is what you're going to have to do. And I'm certainly not taking an ounce of that if you're not willing to go into the luxury tax while you're also putting your focus on an MLB franchise that's using you as a rental and as a couch to sleep on before they get to Las Vegas. So if that were the case, if there's any kind of conversation and concern about extending Mike Brown, look, Vivek, you were here for a long enough part of the drought, and you saw the revolving door of coaches. The last thing this Kings team needs to go through again, an organization needs to go through again, is more turnover on that bench. I would get the deal done now to just secure consistency of not just a guy that knows what he's doing, but a guy that is obviously well liked and well respected and who has admittedly done things wrong in the past and knows how to fix that now. So the extension needs to get done ASAP. I'm not worried about it, but I also think I'm not worried about it because I can't comprehend the Kings being dumb enough to not extend him, like genuinely.
Yeah, dude. I don't know how you see the buy-in defensively at the end of last year and go, that's not the guy.
Yeah, but the offense,
come on.
The offense, when he's being proven right, literally every single playoff game that's low scoring, he's being proven right to a T what they're looking for.
Yeah.
They're like, no, we need to score 120 points again. Okay.
Part of the reason you got him is because he came from Golden State. Can we not listen to the guy a little?
Right.
Like you said, if I'm betting all my money that an extension gets done. But like I said, there's that little tiny piece in the back of my brain that's kind of like, I think I screwed this up. Because I think it'd be a pretty catastrophic mistake.
Kyle, I love that because that's how I know, even though you have your Warriors background and your Bay Area ties, and I love you for it, that's how I know you've been covering the Kings for too long, because that little voice in the back of your head. I love that from you. Very excited about that.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, Kyle, so much for making the time, my friend. We'll have a conversation again in the near future.
Anytime, man.